You're watching The Experience, Comic Culture and Sales, streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's a little slow news-wise lately. Not a lot going on. There's no Marvel shows. It's pretty quiet. So we're going to do something a little different today. But we're going to talk about how to approach writing stories for an existing character. Because we were talking yesterday, you guys seemed interested in approaching writing. So I'm going to do that. But I'm going to start by telling you there are various ways that you could end up getting the possibility or the opportunity to write an existing character. And one of them is that you're out there and you get a chance to pitch to an editor and you come up with ideas. I did that for a couple different companies, including DC. I got to pitch some Jonah Hex stories that maybe I'll dust off someday. But and then sometimes an editor comes to you and goes, hey, do you want to pitch these kind of things? So it goes one way or the other, but I had a very unique one happen. And this one took place, I want to say it was 2009, might have been 2008, but it was around that era. And I was at the Phoenix Comic-Con. And I always traveled back then with Tone Rodriguez. We were good friends. We would do Emerald City. We would do Wizard World Dallas, Phoenix Con, any convention we could go to that he and I could drive to. We would stop in the truck and head out there. And we were at Phoenix, and Phoenix is one of my favorite shows. I love the people who run the show. Now, while I was there, Jim Valentino was walking around. And I have some history with Jim. Jim and I worked on some stuff together. Steve Niles had some books set up there that I wrote, Savage, Strange Tales. So, and then I had also had a book I had set up there called Unravel that we put out, got it solicited, and then we just didn't see the numbers we wanted to see for a mystery, so we decided to pull it before it got published. But I had this good rapport with Jim. And Jim was walking around and he stopped by and said hi, and we talked for a couple minutes. And I said, Jim, there's something I've always wanted to ask you is, what are you doing with Shadowhawk? It'd been a while since the character had been in print. And he said that he was thinking of bringing the character back, but he was thinking of bringing the original Shadowhawk back. Because if you're familiar with Shadowhawk or not, original character was Paul Johnstone, who at the time he was created had AIDS and eventually died, and then was replaced by a younger character. And there was this whole thing that Alan Moore introduced, or Kurt Busiek, I think they were both involved, where all the different Shadowhawks through history, their spirits lived within the helmet. It got really cool. Well, Jim said, yeah, I'm thinking of bringing it back. Do you have any ideas on that? Well, whether I did or not, of course I'm going to say yeah. So I said, yeah, I got some ideas. I could write something up and send it to you. He goes, okay. Who do you think we should get to draw it? Well, I'm sitting next to Tone. And Tone and Jim like each other. And I just turned and I said, well, Tone, of course. And Tone looks over and goes, what? I said, if I write Shadowhawk, do you want to draw it? He goes, yeah. And that was pretty much how that happened, which is one of those weird stories. I've had a couple of those where, they're the stories where you work like hell to get a book picked up and stuff. And then there's other ones that just kind of happen. I like the ones that just kind of happen. They're more fun. But so that is pretty much how Tone and I ended up working on Shadowhawk for Jim Valentino, right around the time of Image United. So let's stay tuned for the Dan Wickline Show. Be right back. everybody. Welcome to the Dan Wickline Show here on The Experience. We got a really good lineup today. Coming up later tonight is What's in the Box with Miss Jen. And then tonight on SketchUp, Mog and Mel will have, I think his name is Damian Allen. Double check that. But the artist behind that Damn Tourist, I think it's called, or Damn Tourist. Both of them are going to be drawing tonight live. And those are going to be auctioned off, I believe. JD, correct me if I'm wrong on any of that.
Nope, got it right so far. It's Alan Carter.
Alan Carter, there it is. That damned Alan Carter, or Damn Tourist Alan Carter. So Alan Carter and Mog will be drawing tonight, and those pieces will be auctioned off, so you can get those. It should be a lot of fun, so you want to tune in for that. So, all right. We are going to do the news, and then we're going to talk about writing for existing characters, or at least coming up with ideas. Now, I was talking with Kyle earlier, and we were talking about writing and stuff like that. And I've written quite a few different characters for other people. So I'm going to give you an idea of how I approach it, what I've done, and talk about some of the different ones I've written for. But first, let's get into the news. JD's already got the title thing put up there. So let's kick it off with, this is kind of interesting. I know everybody right now in the news is watching some guy go to court. But a different person went to court today, which is also important, and that would be Jonathan Majors. Jonathan Majors went to court today, and his trial was supposed to begin. And then it got postponed until September 6th. Now, the postponement was announced by Judge Michael Gaffey after a very short hearing of like 2 minutes in Manhattan today. Now, the reason for the delay, Assistant DA Kelly Galloway told the judge, quote, "The people are not ready for trial today." Now, they requested more time for discovery. Now, the judge granted the request, but told the prosecutors that time will continue to run against the people. And of course, the people in this case are the state, people who are prosecuting. So Majors was in court along with his defense lawyers for the hearing that lasted, like I said, roughly 2 minutes. If he's convicted, these are misdemeanor charges of assault and harassment, but Majors could face up to a year in jail. I don't want to speculate too much. I'm not a lawyer. I was trying to be a lawyer when I was younger. I started doing pre-law in college, but the fact that they're not ready after all these months really makes me question, because they should have had all their ducks in a row. We knew back in June when this date was. So there's been a lot of speculation, a lot of talk from his attorneys saying that they've given tons and tons of evidence to prove that not only did Majors not do anything, but a lot of it was instigated by the supposed victim. So I'm really curious how this is going to play out and what exactly ends up happening. If we get a note tomorrow saying that or in the next month, that the DA has dropped the charges, that wouldn't surprise me at all. Because like I said, this has seemed to have had some flaws to it from the beginning. But so as of right now, the trial has been postponed till September 6th, and we'll have to see where it picks up from there. All right, moving on. The success of the Barbie movie has toy companies like Mattel kind of going, we should get into the entertainment industry. And one that you might not expect is now moving into creating content. Crayola, the people that make crayons, is launching Crayola Studio, a new division to create content for kids and families, and has set its first project. It is teamed with Mimo Studios, which is run by former Nickelodeon chief Sima Zargami, to develop the alien adventures of Finn Caspian, which is a pretty good title. I'll give them that. Overseeing Crayola Studios is Crayola's EVP marketing, Victoria Lozano, who said, "As world leaders in creative self-expression, the establishment of Crayola Studios is a logical next step for us. It builds our plans announced last year to develop entertainment content that inspires and nurtures the next generation and helps them develop lifelong creative mindsets. Our unique perspective offers an exciting opportunity for the industry as it searches for standout, new, and trusted content that has creativity at its heart." I'm still kind of letting that sink in. The idea that Crayola thinks that they are the, what was the term? The leader in creative self-expression. Yeah. If you're curious, the Alien Adventures of Finn Caspian is based on a Gen Z Media Kids podcast written and performed by Jonathan Messenger. The podcast was launched back in 2016 and has released 12 seasons and 260 episodes. Jonathan's putting out a lot of stuff. It centers on Finn Caspian, an 8-year-old boy aboard the famous Marlow 280 interplanetary exploratory space station. Together with friends Abigail, Elias, and Vale, Finn forms Explorer Troop 301, which takes off from the Marlow to explore uncharted planets, help aliens, and solve mysteries that threaten to destroy the space station. Yeah, that sounds actually pretty decent, but I don't get the Crayola part. Will it look like the animation is colored by crayon? Because I might be on board for that. That part I could totally understand. But other than that, I don't get where Crayola thinks that. Never mind. All right, speaking of Barbie, Barbie is really important to us. This was said by Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav in the Q2 earnings call today. And he talks about their first pick under his regime to do $1 billion. Now, in celebrating the pick's success, he indicated that the movie would hit streaming services Max in the fall. He said, "We really believe in the motion picture window. Let it play out, go into PVOD, take it through the window that have worked forever in the business," he said. "When it gets to Max, it'll have a good impact in the fall." It is expected to hit Max in September. Now, he also announced that Max will start adding some news and sports programming. He says that these categories are important. They're differentiators. They're compelling. They make these platforms come alive. If you're on SVOD platform and something is going on in the world and you can see it, it makes the platform really alive. So you'll hear from us on that soon. One of the things that Warner Brothers Discovery owns is CNN. Now, I know CNN was making a CNN Plus for a while. They just launched it, and like a week later, they killed it because of Zaslav. So we'll have to see if some of the things that they were thinking for CNN Plus will end up on Max. Still not used to calling it Max. Then, of course, I'm not used to calling Twitter X either, and I may never do that. All right, speaking of toy companies, we seem to have a theme going here. Barbie saves the DCU, absolutely. Yeah, that really could be the way it works out, because they're hemorrhaging money off of these DC films. Barbie might be what is going to end up fueling Superman Legacy. So if Zaslav is right in giving James Gunn and Peter Safran the reins to DCU, then it might be Barbie that actually bridges the gap to get us there. So, all right. Speaking of, like I said, toy companies, Hasbro will move to an asset-light model for future live action entertainment following the 500 million E1 sale. This is a fascinating sale to me. According to CEO Chris Cooks, he said, where did I lose it? Speaking as the toy giant unveiled the E1 deal plus Q2 earnings, Cox said that going forward, Hasbro will rely on licensing and partnerships with select co-production partners. He cited the likes of the upcoming Transformers 1 animation and the Dungeons & Dragons TV series as an example, both of which are being made with Paramount. Hasbro originally acquired E1 in 2019 for $4 billion. And then they sold it for $500 million. Although they did keep a hold of about 15% of what they bought, the lucrative family brands division that houses staples such as Peppa Pig and PJ Masks. Cox said the move will give us a greater focus and financial flexibility moving forward. Hasbro revenue fell 10% to $1.2 billion for the quarter, while adjusted operating profits nearly halved to $136 million. That sounds like a really nice spin on we just sold something for a quarter of that, an eighth of its value, but we got to keep Peppa Pig. You need to really like Peppa Pig if you're making that deal. So, hey, Zack Snyder may be doing a director's cut of a previous movie. Yeah, I know. Sounds like we've heard this before, but Zack Snyder's surreal film Sucker Punch has had an extended Blu-ray for a while, but the director has raised fanboy and fangirls' hopes by stating in a recent interview that we ain't seen nothing yet. It's been almost 10 years since the film came out. Snyder revealed the original outcome of the story in an interview with Letterboxd. Now, I'm going to read this to you. You guys tell me if this sounds like it's worth going through all this just to add. He says, I've never gotten around to doing the director's cut. I still plan to at some point, but in the original ending, when Baby Doll is in the chair in the basement with Blue, she's already been lobotomized. When the cop shines the light on her, the set breaks apart, and she stands up and she sings a song on stage. Yes, she sings, "Ooh, child, things are gonna get easier." Blondie and all the people that have been killed join in. And it's the idea that, in a weird way, even though she's lobotomized, she's kind of stuck in this infinite loop of euphoric victory. It's weirdly not optimistic, really, and optimistic at the same time. So it's weirdly not optimistic and optimistic at the same time. That's kind of what the tone was at the end. We tested it, and the studio thought it was too weird, so we changed it. Now, Snyder has not said when or if his version will be out, but he clearly wants to give it oxygen. So, yeah. So if you've seen Sucker Punch and you can now visualize that ending of "Ooh, child, things are going to be brighter" by a lobotomized baby doll, you're welcome. You can now add that to your memory banks. All right, we got one more story here. Anthony Mackie is talking about the upcoming Captain America Brave New World as coming full circle back to Captain America Winter Soldiers. Now, in an interview that he did prior to the SAG-AFTRA strike, the actor talked about how the new film returns to one of the locations he shot at previously for Winter Soldier. He said, one of my first Marvel scenes was me sitting at a table talking to the senator and me and Chris Evans and Scarlett Johansson kidnapping him, and we go back and we stay at the same hotel and we shot at the same area. So in that regard, it was real emotional to think how far my character has come and where he is now after 10 years that I've been in the MCU. Now, the only problem with that is he's got the scene wrong. The Washington, D.C. hotel that the Capstar reference is where Sam threatened and later kidnapped Hydra agent Jasper Sitwell in the 2014 film. But there is a senator, Gary Shandling plays the senator in the scene, and that's when we find out he's Hydra, but he's not the one being threatened. The threat is actually to Jasper Sitwell, who then ends up on the roof, and they throw him off, and Falcon flies him back up, and then he gets killed by Winter Soldier. So, but it does come back around to the same hotel, so that's pretty cool. So, all right, we are going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about writing existing characters. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask, and we're going to jump into it right after this.
Why was Princess Zelda sad after watching a bunch of YouTube videos? She couldn't find the link in the description. We'll stop if you subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's super easy. Click subscribe and click the bell when you do, and thanks for supporting the EXP.
To be continued. 3 little words that hold the secret to the next great story. 3 words that will thrill you, confound you, give life to new possibilities. Every variation of To Be Continued is a promise of adventure, a promise of excitement, a promise of unseen wonders and unexplored worlds. A promise that every issue you read makes you a part of a never-ending journey. And behind every page, there will be an unopened door waiting for you. This story to be continued at your local comic book shop. Visit comicshoplocator.com today.
You know how when you go to Comic-Con, after Comic-Con, you go to the hotel bar, and there's a whole bunch of people playing music and dancing, and you've got Pikachu and Lara Croft Tomb Raider doing the cha-cha slide just down from Deadpool and Batman and Wonder Woman? That's every Saturday night over on the Experience Twitch channel. Join Taji Beats for the EXP Dance Party, exclusively on Twitch, twitch.tv/the_EXP. Programming on the EXP is made possible by viewers like you, or your local comic shop, or that Kickstarter you backed, or the publisher you like, or comic industry professionals who want to share a message with the world. Really, anyone who wants to advertise with us can. If you're interested in seeing a product you know and love, or are creating, or are publishing, or are involved with, advertised here on The Experience, and having your message shared with our viewers, please reach out by scanning the QR code below or visiting our website and using the contact form.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dan Wickline Show here on The Experience. And remember to stick around tonight for SketchUp. Get a chance to bid on the artwork from Alan Carter and Mog Park. So you definitely want to stick around for that. Plus remember, starting on Sunday, we are going to be giving away slabbed comics during different shows. We're not going to say which shows you got to watch, so you're going to have to tune in. But we're giving away 20, so there's a good chance there's going to be multiple per day. So just line them up, start watching the shows. Put like Triple B's working on the videos at home. Just tune in like that, and as soon as they tell you to type something in the chat, do that, and you could end up with a free comic book slab. All right. One quick bit of news popped up, and this is more of a squashing of a rumor. There was a rumor that started this morning that perhaps Jack Quaid was going to be cast as Johnny Storm in the Fantastic Four. And when I first saw that rumor, it felt like fan casting to me. You'll notice this, that anytime somebody plays in a superhero movie, then people start trying to cast them in other superhero movies. Jack, of course, plays Huey in The Boys. He was just in Oppenheimer. He plays in Starfleet Lower Decks. So he's getting pretty popular. And he's also the son of Dennis Quaid and Meg Ryan. So that rumor came out this morning. Well, Jack himself has already come out and went, no. He squashed it like a bug, but it's interesting how he squashed it. His actual response was, "Hello, everyone. No, not playing Johnny Storm, but I'm flattered. Now that you're here, though, how about donating to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation if you can?" So good on Jack for not only coming out and just setting the record straight, but putting a plug in for the Screen Actors Guild. So, all right. Let's talk about writing for existing characters. See, as a writer, you have, if it's a character you've created, it's very simple. You can do whatever the hell you want, especially if it's a self-owned thing. I mean, if you're writing for another company, you got to talk about their parameters. But like when I sit down and do a Lucius Fogg book, I don't have to check with anybody. I can just start writing, and when I'm done, I hand it to my editor, and she goes through and tells me why I did everything wrong. But the story is mine. I can do what I want with it. If I'm writing on somebody else's character, and again, public domain characters are the exception, because you can do whatever you want to a public domain character as long as you're only using the items that are in the public domain. There's some characters you have to be careful of, like Boston Blackie. The character of Boston Blackie is in the public domain. But most people know Boston Blackie from the radio programs in the 40s. Well, they introduced a character named Shorty, who is a great sidekick for Boston. Shorty, because the radio programs aren't technically in public domain yet, Shorty's not in the public domain. So you can use all of Boston and his girlfriend and the setup from Jack Boyle's original 1910 novel, but you can't use the stuff that they introduced in the radio programs because they're not public domain yet. Now, that said, if you're writing somebody else's character, like I did with Shadowhawk, or with Zenoscope Sinbad, or the Vampirella, Green Hornet, the Phantom, those characters are owned by somebody, so you have to play within their world. Now, you might come across a licensor or an editor that just doesn't care, or it's a property that is so far out there that they're desperate for new attention, or it could be that whatever you do is going to be labeled as kind of an Elseworld, and then it won't connect to the rest of the stuff. There's a lot of possibility there. But let's take it approaching a character. Let's start with the Phantom. I did a short story for Moonstone of the Phantom. I've done a few short stories for them. 2 Green Hornet story, the original, the Avenger, the pulp version, not the British TV show or the Marvel guys, and the Phantom. Now, when I approach writing a character that has a history, but I can't sit down and read everything about the character, what I try to do is figure out something about the character that is unique to them, something that makes them stand out, that is, a defining trait about the character. When I sat down to write the Phantom, the thing that stood out to me was the fact that Kit Walker wasn't the original Phantom. he was the current Phantom, and he's the one we see most of the time. But his father was the Phantom, and his father before him, and down the line. And it's a legacy character that is very important. That legacy is very important to the character. The Skull Cave, there's journals from all the different Phantoms, the combined knowledge that they then pass down to each other. Who the Phantom is, the symbol of the Phantom is more important than the person who's wearing the mask. And when I approached the story, I knew that I needed to make that the key. So what I did was I came up with the idea that the Phantom had screwed with a guy, a particular mobster, or I don't remember who it was, but to the point where he decided to hire a killer to go after the Phantom and to go after him in his home turf. The killer had a specialty. He would observe a victim and figure out exactly the best way to take them out. He would study them. He was very analytical, dug into the character, found out everything he could about it, so that when it finally came time to kill the guy, he knew everything he could possibly know and be prepared. He's kind of like Batman in that sense. Given enough time to prepare, he could take out anybody. Well, this particular guy got so deep into the Phantom lore, found the Skull Cave and started looking at the journals and stuff, and eventually took on the persona of the Phantom to bring Kit Walker back home, because he wasn't there at the time. And when there's reports now of the Phantom doing good things, Kit decides to head home to find out what's going on. This leads to a battle between the two, and they're pretty evenly matched at this point. And the guy's even wearing the Phantom costume, and it gets resolved in a way that shows that the killer, by his research, got to understand the importance of the legacy. And when that legacy came into threat, came into danger, he was willing to sacrifice himself for the sake of that legacy. And like I said, that's how I approached that particular story, because there's no way I can know what every short story, everything out there is that people have done with the Phantom over the years. The character's been around since the early 20s or 30s. So I approached it from that point of view. Now, that worked out well. And I'm very happy with that story. But that's just, that approach will work with other characters. When it came time to write a Green Hornet story, the thing about the Green Hornet that stood out to me when I started looking into it, and I knew the Green Hornet a little better. My dad was a huge fan. The Green Hornet was created by a radio station in Chicago. And my dad grew up in Chicago and listened to the stories when they came out. And this is the same radio station that created the Lone Ranger, which is why, if you look into the Green Hornet's history, he is the great nephew of the Lone Ranger. There's actually a family connection between the two, John Reed and Britt Reed. But as I was looking at the character, what jumped out to me in that case was the world thinks the Green Hornet's a bad guy. Only the DA, Britt Reed, and Kato know the truth. That the Green Hornet is posing as a mobster to be able to get in and take down the mob. So that was my hook there. Ed says that's a cool piece of trivia. I didn't know that about their connection. Yeah. So that was my hook there. The fact that nobody, that wasn't really well known. They all thought he was a bad guy. So the story I told was the Green Hornet is going in to take out like a counterfeiting deal in a warehouse down by the docks. There's an explosion. He gets thrown out of the building and into the water, unconscious. A small-time smuggler named Eugene Pops Roberts finds the body, pulls it out of the water, and sees that it's the Green Hornet and is freaked out. Now, he takes him back to this little shack that he lives in, and Pops nurses him back to health. But because of the explosion and hitting his head on the way out, he doesn't remember who he is. So filling in the gaps is the smuggler, who only knows him as the criminal he pretends to be. So that's the story. It's basically the Green Hornet trying to reconcile the fact that he's a criminal, even though he doesn't feel like he would be a criminal. It feels like it goes against what he believes in. But this is the information he's getting. Now, that story was really important to me because the character of Pops was my opportunity to introduce my father in as a character. My father's first name was Eugene. We all called him Pops. I couldn't give my last name because nobody's going to buy that, oh, Dan Wickline wrote a story about a character named Eugene Wickline. So I borrowed his brother's name, Robert, and made Roberts. So, and the two of them grew up together listening to the Green Hornet. So I put the name together, and then I got an opportunity later on to do another Green Hornet story where I was able to bring Pops back. So, and since it is part of the Green Hornet canon, I was able to enter my father into the Green Hornet lore, which was something very cool to me. And my dad appreciated that too. He really liked it. But so that's how I approached that character, was hooking in on the twist, the fact that he poses as a villain. Now, the other end of that spectrum is sometimes you want to ignore the history. When I sat down to write Shadowhawk, I got the chance to write Shadowhawk. Named Sean Shaw was supposed to work on the book. I ran into him at Wizard World Dallas. He said, "Hey, I'm doing this with this new company. They're called Zenoscope. They're looking for a writer. Why don't you put something together? I'll introduce you." I'm like, great. And that's how I ended up, meeting Joe and Ralph and put together a pitch. And my original pitch was for a 24-issue story, and I got to do half of it. But when I went to go look at Sinbad and read the 7 Voyages of Sinbad, the different stories, I realized that Sinbad was the world's worst sailor. The guy went on 7 voyages and shipwrecked 7 times. He wasn't a sailor. He was an accident waiting to happen. Never once did he return on the same boat he left on. It was absolutely ridiculous. So first thing, to refer to him as Sinbad the Sailor is an absolute joke. He's only a sailor because he keeps going on boats. He was a rich guy who was squandering his father's his inheritance. He ended up spending the last of his money on goods, put them on a boat so that he could go overseas to sell it, and the ship wrecks. They end up on an island that's actually the back of a turtle or a whale. I mean, it is all bizarre stuff, but it's none of what people think of as Sinbad. And my edict from Zenoscope was that they really wanted a swashbuckler type character that was somewhere between James Bond and Jack Sparrow. So I couldn't have him be this hapless sailor. that just happened to find a way home each time. So I decided to move the story up past his 7 journeys and what happened to him after all the bad luck, and how he became more confident, how he became kind of a womanizer and a rogue, and like I said, somewhere between Jack Sparrow and James Bond. And I decided to introduce a crew for him. But I wanted a backstory. Like, he basically steals a ship and a crew. So first thing we had to ask is, what happened to his old ship and his old crew? And that became a story later on. Second is, why does he need a ship? Well, we find out that he is wanted for murdering the Sultan. So now we got his backstory and his quest. His quest is to find this mythical visor that would allow him to see the moment the Sultan is killed and find out who really killed him. It's this mythical item, except it had been broken into 4 parts and spread around the world. Your basic quest story. But I did something unique with the crew, is I didn't want them to be a standard crew. I kind of wanted to take an X-Men approach. I wanted these to be misfits and cast-offs. So instead of it being a normal ship, it's a traveling circus. And it's the members of the circus. There's a fire eater, there's a strong guy, there's somebody who's supposed to have magic powers, there's a knife thrower. So I was able to kind of work all that into the story. But again, wouldn't have been any good if we would have done the original Sinbad story. So that's how I approached Sinbad, and it worked out pretty well. We did a bunch of issues. People seemed to really like it. But the problem is that Sinbad's audience wanted a lot of the TNA covers. And when you're doing the story about a bald guy with tattoos, you don't get a lot of TNA covers. So, all right, let's go ahead. We'll take a quick break. And when we come back, I'll talk about 1 or 2 more characters and how I approach their stories. Be right back.
Join the party. Head over to our link tree to find all the links for everywhere the experience is all the time.
There's something for every imagination at your local comic shop. Visit comicshoplocator.com to find a store near you.
What if Hans Gruber from Die Hard had to battle the Joker from Batman the Animated Series in a dance battle? Or who would win in a race between Baby from Baby Driver and Snidely Whiplash? If Austin Powers and Shrek found themselves in a hot dog eating contest, who would emerge victorious? These are the questions we talk about on Nerd Killer Warfare. Debate the most absurd questions you've ever heard in popular culture. Register now by scanning the QR code or visiting bit.ly/EXP casting.
everybody. Welcome back to the Dan Wickline Show. We are talking about how do you write for existing characters. Remember to stick around for What's in the Box and SketchUp tonight. With SketchUp, you have a chance to bid on the two pieces of live art happening, one from Mog Park and the other from Alan Carter. So stick around for that. Also, remember, we've got the big giveaways starting on Sunday of 20 slabbed comics. All right. Oh, and remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons. So since we started with the story of how I got the Shadowhawk book, let me tell you about Shadowhawk. Now, at the time that what Jim wanted to do was to bring the original Shadowhawk back. And there was to me, there was a built-in way to do it already. The character had changed quite a bit over the years. When I read it and really liked the character, it was Paul Johnstone, an assistant DA, who got grabbed by the mob and injected with a blood sample that had the HIV virus or AIDS. So it was a slow way to kill him. And he was the backbreaker, and then he died. He did his story and he died. Now, eventually, Shadowhawk went on to have like this history legacy of Shadowhawks. There was a Shadowhawk in the Old West and in Roman days. So there was this legacy of the character. And eventually, this kid becomes the new Shadowhawk. And we find out about him and his girlfriend and other characters. And Jim builds this new universe around this new Shadowhawk. And it was the time that Image United was starting. So he wanted to come up with a way to bring back the original. And I had suggested, because one of the things the kid could do is he could tap into the spirit of all of the other Shadowhawks. So, and like I said, his dad was a big part of the character. So what I had pitched was that in Image United, there would be a scene where the young Shadowhawk gets overrun by the Daemonites or whatever it is that they're fighting. And he's so injured and so beaten. The helmet is knocked off. His costume is just beaten to hell. And his father is watching him die. And he desperately runs out and he grabs the helmet, knowing that his son can speak to the spirit of the previous Shadowhawks. And it's like a Shadowhawk council. It's a really interesting thing they did. And he puts the helmet on and he begs for them to intervene, to do something to save his son, or give him the strength to save his son. And what they end up doing is allowing the last Shadowhawk, Paul Johnstone, to come back to life using the dad's body, and it basically transformed him into Paul Johnstone. But so the dad basically sacrificed himself to save his son, and then that's how we ended up with Paul Johnstone back. And that was all supposed to take place in Image United. And then we would launch the new series with the new Paul Johnstone. And my approach to that was going to be, okay, one of the things I didn't want to do was break a back. The young kid had built up a lot of good rapport for Shadowhawk. So I wanted to bring him back as almost a Batman-like character. And he was already a Batman-like character. He had a butler at one point, and it had that basis to it. So what I wanted to do was build a group around him. I wanted the old friends of the young Shadowhawk to question the new guy. And I wanted, the police and everything else to kind of form around him, so he would build this support group. So he starts working with the cops, with one of the detectives. He starts working with these other heroes and I wanted to build this story up. But I wanted to build it up to a point where he gets pushed so far that he eventually does have to break a back. And when he does so, he loses all that he built up. So I wanted to build this up to create this new version of Shadowhawk, then I wanted to take it all away from him. And I thought that would be a compelling arc. I had some interesting villains. And we got to tell 4 stories, and we got 5 issues out. But it was a little ill-fated because Image United was counting on Valentino, Silvestri, Liefeld, Larson, McFarlane, and of course Robert Kirkman to put this book out. And each one was drawing their own pages or their own characters, so these pages were moving about. So book 1 came out. I don't remember if a second book came out. They never got to the part where Shadowhawk actually, where the young Shadowhawk gets injured and the dad sacrifices himself. So by issue 4, we had no real launch into the series. By issue 4, the numbers just weren't there. So issue 5, we told the story of how Paul Johnstone came back, and then we just ended the series there. But I had a year's worth of story that was going to end. I created some new villains. So I had this big thing set up that was going to be a lot of fun. And like I said, it just didn't work out. But I felt that it was a good approach to the character because it played off on, it took away the one thing he was known the most for, which was breaking backs. And I thought that was important to do because that became, something that would build up to. That there would always be the question in the back of the mind. Is he going to do it? When's he going to do it? I would even give opportunities where it looked like he might. And I wanted to show that he had changed to a point. So that was my plan with the character. And I really wish I could have finished that whole story arc because I thought it was very cool. I was excited about it, but it just didn't work out. That's how comics are. So, and there's other characters that I've had the opportunity to work on. When I got to do Tom Judge over at Top Cow, also known as The Rapture, it always fascinated me that he was an excommunicated priest. So I wanted to play on that. That was the thing that always interested me. So I wanted to play on religion, to play on his lack of faith and what he might need to keep going. When I did the Vampirella book, I really wanted to boil her back down to the type of things she did in the old magazine, which was maybe being a monster hunter, being straightforward. But I also wanted to introduce some new characters. So in the Blood Dragon, there's a whole new group or another heroine that she meets, stuff like that. But again, I wanted to boil it down to how she was in the old magazine. And then Purgatory, I thought was interesting because I think very few people actually knew her origin. And when I went back to look it up and look what her origin was, it was done in like 6 pages in the middle of a Chaos comic. And I thought that has definitely not been fleshed out. That's just little hints. So I took that and I expanded it out, and I really played on the fact that she used to be a slave that ended up ruling the country and stuff like that. I did a Purgatory novel called Chaos Rising. You can get it on Amazon. It's Amazon has a Purgatory Rising or Chaos Rising. And it really does break down the history of the character. It all takes place, well, most of it takes place in the past. There's a bookend story that, potential for setting up other stuff. But it was a real fun book to do because I got to write ancient Egyptian stuff. I got to kind of tap into how she's part vampire, but part something else, and really explore that character, which is something that I don't think anybody really done. They don't really play into her history and to who she is. They just kind of make her a badass and move forward. So yeah, that's my approach to taking on characters that already exist, is to find something, a thread in their history that makes them who they are, and then play with that. Any character you want to play with, you do that. If I was going to do a James Bond, I'd really want to play with the fact that there's other 00 agents. I think that's a great part. Yeah, there's lots of characters out there that are fun. I could probably, find something on any character. That's why my attitude about writing is make me the offer. Tell me what you want. And then I will go and I will find the story I want to tell within it. Whether you want a horror story, a thriller, a mystery, a big shoot 'em up, you tell me what you're looking for and I'll supply it, the new series I'm working on for Ethereal Comics for Morgana. The thing I was looking for there, the hook on Morgana, was the fact that, in some texts she's the half brother of Arthur, and others she's not. She's part Fae, but nobody had really taken this approach that I've done. So I'm looking forward to playing with that. Triple B says, just bought Chaos Rising. Can't wait to read it. Well, thank you, sir. I'd love to hear what you think on it. So, all right, guys, that's going to have to wrap it up there. We will be back next week with fun stuff. We didn't do a Pop Go the Writer on Sunday because Jim had some work stuff he had to do, but we'll be back this Sunday night. So I will see you guys on Sunday for Pop Go the Writers, and then back here on Tuesday. Have a great night. Remember, stick around for What's in the Box and Sketch Up later tonight with live art by Mog Park and Alan Carter. Good night, everybody.
Do you remember what it was like when you were a little kid and you got a letter in the mail? Now imagine that letter was filled with information about your favorite shows, pop culture questions, links to things you're going to want to see later, and even sneak peeks at upcoming programming here on The Experience. That's what the EXP mailing list is. Every week, we send you sneak peeks, information, and all of the relevant links for all of the shows you want to see. Sign up now on our website or scan the QR code that's on your screen right now.